Thank you very much. And still, talking about OutSystems is my vacation, I'm more than happy to jump in and have a chat with you guys. All right, a quick introduction about myself while I bring up the slides here. My name is Osama. I'm an OutSystems technical lead at Phoenix and a trainer as well. And today I'm going to be talking about mobile app update distribution strategies. It's a mouthful, I know, but it is very important in my opinion. And it's a topic that's coming in a very timely manner for me specifically because it is something that we had to tackle for a couple of clients very recently. So I will share my screen here to get things kicked off. All right. Just making sure it's up. All right, there we go. So mobile app update distribution strategies. First of all, I wanted to start with a quick definition of what mobile application update distribution means, so we can get going. Essentially, mobile application update distribution means refers to the process of releasing app updates to a set of users to continuously promote app engagements and usage. So in other words, you've gone live, you've deployed and distributed your native mobile application to your customers, and now it's time to push out updates, whether that's new enhancements, new features, bug fixing, etc. And usually, this strategy or this process revolves around three key factors that you always have to consider when putting together a robust strategy. Number one is distribution channels, which essentially means the method of which you're going to be pushing out your updates. And of course, if you're using, for example, the Google Play Store to distribute your mobile app, then that's where you're going to be distributing your updates. Similarly, if you're using a private enterprise store, that's where you're going to be distributing your updates as well. So this is very important to consider. Number two is the update frequency. So are you going to be pushing out updates every week, every month, every couple of months? So that's something also you have to factor in. However, the third one, and the one I want to be delving deep into, is update type. Now, typically, there's two update types that we would talk about, especially in the realm of OutSystems. Number one being hybrid updates, and number two being store-only updates. Let's start with hybrid updates first and talk about what it is, and then we can compare it to store-only updates and then connect everything back into our OutSystems application. So what are hybrid updates? Essentially, hybrid updates is the update type that all OutSystems, native OutSystems mobile applications are configured to. So when you build your OutSystems application and deploy it, you would have the hybrid update distribution strategy set up by default. And what that means is when you deploy a new version of your mobile application to the target service or production, for example, a soft update would be immediately available for end users who have your app installed. So as soon if I'm an end user and I've got this mobile app installed on my device, after the deployment, the OutSystems deployment occurs and completes successfully, if I open the app on my mobile device, then you would see a blue banner that comes from the top of the screen saying that your app has been updated to the latest version or something along these lines, indicating that you've just received a soft update and now your app is running on the latest version. However, with hybrid updates, there's also a secondary update type which also falls into the mix, which is the app shell update. So you have the option of also distributing the latest APK or IPA, depending on the operating system that your app is working on, to your customers. And that will be done via the distribution channels that you've defined. So in this particular illustration, we have a soft update being fired off to the end user when they launch the app. And you've also got an app shell update that you also want to distribute to your customers via the Play Store and the Apple App Store as well. All right. One thing to note about this approach here is for the soft updates, the one at the top, there isn't a toggle to turn it off if you're in hybrid update mode. So as long as you're working with hybrid updates and seemingly leave everything as is, as default, as for your OutSystems application, soft updates will always be fired and always be made available when the end user accesses their mobile application. However, on the other hand, the app shell update is completely optional. If there isn't anything that requires a new build, then potentially you'd be happy with just the soft update that the customers just received without having to go through the submission process for your latest build, right? Let's talk about some of the advantages and disadvantages of this. So number one, instant update delivery. So of course, with the soft update, like we just mentioned, as soon as the OutSystem deployment is complete, the soft update will be available for your end users. It's not as fast as Leo's damn fast PDF generator, but it is pretty fast. So you can count on me on that one. The second advantage here is the reduced risk of upbugs. So very tightly related to point number one, because you have the ability to push out soft updates very quickly after the deployment concludes, then there's a less chance of a customer to encounter any bugs that you might just have fixed with that soft update. So that speed also plays a big advantage for your update distribution strategy. And number three, and this might be a big one for particular requirements, critical updates are delivered even if the auto update feature is turned off. So some customers like to disable like to go into the App Store and disable auto update capability from the App Store. So what that means is if you release a new version, new app shell version into the App Store, then it wouldn't be automatically downloaded. The user would have to open the Play Store and download it manually. However, with soft updates being available, then you can circumvent this this feature, and you'll always be able to patch, any vulnerabilities, any minor UI or minor logic changes that you need to do, even if this option is turned off for particular customers. Looking at the other side, disadvantages, obviously starting with the very obvious one, soft updates will only be transmitted over to customers if the customer is online, or if the device of the customer is online. If your application is in an offline environment, then obviously soft updates wouldn't reach your device until you connect to the internet. And this is where the second point comes in. I'll give a bit of a scenario for this one particularly to be able to explain it a little bit better. So let's consider a scenario where you're building a native mobile application and it's primarily going to be deployed in an offline environment. So it's not going to be connected to the internet for a prolonged period of time, months, 6 months, a year, you don't know. It has to work offline. Now, if you have hybrid updates enabled, what would happen is, as you continue to improve the application and continue to deploy new versions of this application and soft updates potentially being sent out to the online versions of that mobile application, this particular device or the devices that are not connected to the internet will not receive the soft updates. And those will accumulate over time. So soft update after soft update not being installed onto those offline devices. And then what would happen is eventually when this device goes online, whether that's 6 months or 1 year down the line, the application will try to download the latest soft update that you deployed. And what it might do is it might try to modify app parts or run scripts or run any changes that this update will introduce to app parts that don't exist on your app yet because of the missed soft updates that came previously. And what might happen is you might be putting your user data in jeopardy because you wouldn't know exactly how the application behave after trying to install a version which is 10 versions after for example, 10 versions after the version that's currently installed on the device. So there is a risk there that has to be factored in for those kinds of scenarios. And finally, point number 3 is degradation of user experience when soft updates rely on new native functionality. This is something that we encounter pretty frequently with native mobile applications, especially with apps that leverage a lot of native functionalities like accessing the webcam, the file system, etc. And what this point is referring to is when you introduce a new native capability to your mobile application, you have to distribute a new app shell or a new build to your customers to be able to leverage this native capability. And what tends to happen if you have hybrid mode enabled, then the soft update will deploy some logic which might have been deployed prematurely because it wouldn't be fully functional until the native build is available. And what would usually happen is, of course, following OutSystem's best practices, you would usually, have your Cordova plugin checks to ensure that, that the particular plugin that you're trying to access is available and that catches some of these errors. But you also sometimes have to build error pages, which state that you have to update the latest version of your application before you can access this particular application. So user experience is usually affected when you encounter scenarios like these. So what can we do in these situations? Well, This is where store-only updates come into play. Very, very similar to hybrid updates, however, minus the soft update. So as soon as you deploy your OutSystems application to the target server, a soft update wouldn't be pushed out to your end user, to the end user devices after they've launched the app. The only way you would able to transmit those updates to your end users is via app shell updates or via the store, as the name suggests. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages for this particular approach? Well, number one, under advantages, increased app stability for offline applications. So again, tying into the scenario we talked about for the hybrid, some of the downsides of that hybrid approach, where offline applications, the data of offline applications might be placed in jeopardy or on risk, especially for prolonged periods of time. This scenario here ensures that for every update that you deploy, you can properly control and properly upgrade devices which are running older versions to the latest version. So you have way more control of what you can do with the in the update process of those devices. Number two is controlled rollout plan. So there's a lot of organizations, especially large organizations, which like to use multiple distribution channels. So they like to distribute the app via the App Store, via the Play Store. They might have an enterprise store for a different set of applications. They might use an MDM solution to roll out updates to on-site devices. So for scenarios like these, for organizations like those, a controlled rollout plan is way more beneficial and way more easy to control than a plan where soft updates are released every time you deploy a version to the target server, and maybe one distribution channel might be ahead of another one. So having the updates only being transmitted via app shells, it ensures that and assists those managers to deploy those updates on those different distribution channels in a more timely manner, in a more controlled manner. All right. And finally, one of the biggest advantages that sometimes might be overlooked whilst using store-only updates is increased flexibility in PVT. So considering a scenario where hybrid updates is enabled, when you release a version when you deploy an update to the target environment, because a soft update is immediately made accessible for your end users, it might be harder to run extensive PVT tests, or at least as many PVT tests as you want before the update gets into the customer's hands. With the store only, because the only way that customers would receive any updates are via the app stores, then you would have a prolonged time or period of time to run PVT, to execute any of the tests that you prefer to run in production, for example, way before any other customer gets their hand on the latest update. And if you're happy with the update, then you would push those updates into your Play Store, into your enterprise stores, etc. Let's look at some of the disadvantages for this approach. Number one, of course, it's not instantaneous. So no soft updates, no updates that can be fixed, that can be rolled out immediately. You're really controlled by the distribution channels that you're using for this approach. So let's take the Play Store or the App Store as an example. Usually, you might expect those public stores to take, let's say, up to 2 days to review a new change that you might want to list in the stores. So even if you wanted to change something extremely minor in your application, it might take those 2 days for that change to reflect in your customers' devices. So that's number one of the biggest disadvantages. Number two, which is something, again, very closely related to number one, is the increased chance to encounter bugs and vulnerability. So exactly the opposite of hybrid, where because of this instantaneous update that you send out, you can patch any vulnerabilities or risk before a lot of the customers access your application. In this scenario over here, because there's this potentially, taking the 2-day example here again, there's a 2-day gap before the latest update, which is the end users, then there's an increased chance for your end users to encounter those bugs, encounter those risks in your mobile application. So that's something that also need to consider. Now, you might be asking, well, okay, you said hybrid updates is what OutSystems application is used by default. So how do I enable this for OutSystems? Now, a lot of users might not know this, but you can, in fact, switch over to store-only update mode in OutSystems on an app basis, as a matter of fact. A few disclaimers, though, I guess, or a few things to note. Number one, this this feature, which OutSystems calls Configure Mobile Application Updates Distribution, is listed under technical preview. And what that means is this feature might not be suitable for all scenarios. You need to thoroughly test this feature on a sandbox application, for example, just to ensure that you're not increasing or adding any risk to your application because you're leveraging a technical preview option. And a second thing to consider here is OutSystems support sometimes will not be able to assist you with technical preview features because, again, they're not available. They're not enabled by default. They're not for general availability. They're under technical preview for a reason, of course. So just wanted this quick disclaimer just to ensure that you test this feature with another app thoroughly before implementing it on your production application. However, it is actually very easy to enable this. So there is a three main prerequisites that you need to know of, which is one, you need to be running lifetime 11.6 or higher. You need to be running platform server 11.10 or higher. And the mobile application you want to enable this feature for has to be generated with MAP 6.2 or higher. Assuming you meet all of these prerequisites, you can go to lifetime, environments, and then on the top right-hand side, there's an option drop-down. If you click on the option drop-down, you would see a technical preview drop-down option. And clicking on that will show you, will navigate you to the technical preview page. And this option over here, this feature, would be one of those, one of the options that you can enable. Now, I will share a link from OutSystems official doc as well, guiding on what you can do and what you can't do with this feature, just so you have a clear vision on some of the potential limitations that they might not apply to your application, but just things to consider before diving in. And finally, assuming you have enabled your feature, then the next time you deploy a mobile application which matches those prerequisites, of course, there'll be a new distribution tab in the configure step in lifetime when you're deploying your application to the next environment. And this distribution tab will be available on a per app basis, meaning that if I have 10 mobile applications, for example, in my deployment plan, each of these applications will have their own configuration. So you can have 5 of these applications left on hybrid, but the other 5, for example, can be set to store only. So you have this configurability. So I will leave links to the OutSystems official docs for this particular feature. I will also leave a link to an article that I published not very long ago, which also breaks this down into further details on why you might want to consider this approach. But more than happy to answer any questions, and thank you for listening.